Greetings loyal subscribers and honoured guests. There hasn't been a new episode looking at the classic Zzapped mega tapes for a few weeks now, but it's time to get back into it with the tape that came alongside issue 22. Rubicon takes pride of place on the front cover, and there is also a demo for us to check out in just a moment. Other cover stars include the fantastic Outrun Europa, which is a game I bought with my own money back in the day and really enjoyed, as well as Winter Camp, which also has a presence on the tape. Speaking of which, let's dive in. The headline game on this tape is definitely Lords of Midnight, an epic fantasy tale featuring dark lords, heroic princes, and all the other trappings that go along with tales like these. It is quite obvious that the main inspiration for the game was the writings of Tolkien, and the Lord of the Rings in particular, but of course the cool thing is that you get to live in this world, explore it, and control multiple heroes at the same time, with the option of controlling vast armies in battle, as you attempt to free the world from the tyranny of Doomdark. Much has been said about this game and its sequels over the years, but I must admit that this is my first time playing one of them. Any of you who are already experts can probably tell, because one of the very first things I managed to do was get Morkin eaten by wolves, and you need him to be alive to stand any chance of victory. The game is fully keyboard controlled, and while there are quite a lot of buttons to keep track of, it isn't too bad when you get used to it. The chances of you getting very far without a map are pretty slim though, but luckily Zzapped provided one in the pages of issue 21, which can easily be found on the internet nowadays. I'm going to have to put a lot more time into Lords of Midnight to be able to make much headway, but fantasy and Lord of the Rings in particular is a favourite of mine, so it is very appealing. The Zzapped crew actually reviewed the game in the very first issue of the magazine, and they were generally very enthusiastic about it. Julian Rignall was a bit disappointed that the game hadn't had any significant changes made to it when it's brought over from the Spectrum, as the graphics are essentially the same. He still loved the core gameplay though. Another holdover from the Spectrum is the complete lack of sound, but that didn't bother Gary Penn, who thought it didn't detract from the game at all. He summed up his thoughts with, "A must for adventurers and strategists alike." They ended up giving Lords of Midnight an overall score of 91%, summing up with, "Worth it if ever a game was." It would certainly have given Zzapped readers many hours of gameplay to get stuck into once they got their hands on this issue. There is still one more full game and 2 playable demos left to check out though. Rubicon is up next, which is a game that was actually developed by Hewson, but eventually released by 21st Century Entertainment after they closed up shop for good. This is essentially a run and gun style shooter where you control a chap who strongly resembles John Rambo as he guns down hordes of strange creatures attempting to do him harm. Every so often the scrolling will stop and you'll need to deal with whatever beasties are blocking your progress before the action can resume. Each creature will flash when you are shooting it in the correct place and doing damage, which is very useful feedback when going up against the bigger beasties. This is pretty good fun, and I did manage to beat the demo level after a bit of practice, where you have the option of looping it round to the start or simply bouncing out to the title screen. Also on my second go, I picked up a jetpack which made evading enemy fire a lot easier for a time, until I eventually died and then had to play the rest of the level on foot. Zzapped were of the opinion that Rubicon really doesn't offer anything new. It is quite similar to Hawkeye really, but they enjoyed it more than that Thalamus game. The production value is very high though, with attractive visuals, fantastic and huge monsters to battle, good controls and decent but not perfect sound. I did feel that the loud gun sounds drowned out the music too much. If you're looking for an arcade style experience for the Commodore 64 though, then Rubicon will serve you very well. They gave the game an overall score of 88% and summed up with, "A dazzling arcade experience." I do agree that it was a lot of fun and I would like to play more of it in the future. Let's look at the other full game on this tape now, which is Powerama, released on the Powerhouse label. It's a very standard vertical shooter really, That reminds me a little bit of Star Force, but it's considerably less challenging than most games of this type. I didn't really start losing my lives until the second stage. Visually the game is just sort of okay though, and the design feels a little bit unexciting and lifeless. I'm not entirely sure if this is a shoot 'em up construction kit game or not, but I don't think it is. It runs a lot smoother than most Suit games do under emulation. It's definitely not the worst shooter I've ever played, but it does feel extremely unremarkable and middle of the road. Zzapped never reviewed it themselves. Let's move on to the final thing then. We conclude this episode with the playable demo of Winter Camp, which opens with some annoying joystick waggling. Maximus' mouse just kept on falling in the water until I switched joystick ports and got it working. After you do manage to avoid freezing to death in the water, you then have one of those memory games to beat where you have to watch which icicles Clyde Radcliffe Creatures fame is hitting to make musical notes, and then repeat it at the bottom of the screen. It starts off being pretty easy to keep up with at the beginning because there are only 5 notes to memorise, but there is an extra note on each round. I nearly beat it, but I failed in the last round because I couldn't remember the last few notes. Interestingly, the designer was considering making this minigame even harder by just having Clyde whistle the notes, and then you would have to figure out which icicle matches up with the notes he's producing. Not sure if he did make that change in the full game though, because I still haven't played it. Visually, Winter Camp looks great with some really charming cartoon graphics, and the music is really good too, but I'm not too sure about the gameplay based on what I've seen here. Hopefully some of the other minigames are more interesting. The review score from Zzapped would certainly indicate that they are, as they gave it a whopping 93% overall, concluding with, "Get your wellies on, this is fun." I'm definitely going to have to try both Summer Camp and Winter Camp soon, as I have wanted to play them for years. For now though, that brings another episode to an end. I would need to spend a lot more time with Lords of Midnight to fully appreciate it, but for now I'm going to say that the Rubicon demo was the best thing on here. Join me again in 2 weeks' time for episode 23, and in the meantime, take care.